Welcome to Module 6, Part 5, Idiosyncratic Phonological Processes. In Part 5, I will review 5 idiosyncratic processes that are typically observed in the speech of children with phonological disorders or delays, and give examples of each. Once again, in order to be successful on the module completion quiz, it will be necessary for you to apply the knowledge you gain using the in-chapter and end-of-chapter exercises. Children with phonological disorders are often considered to be delayed in their phonological acquisition compared to their peers, because they apply the same phonological processes as those observed in typically developing children, but they continue to apply those processes well beyond the age at which they are normally resolved in typically developing children. One example might be a child who continues to consistently apply weak syllable deletion at age 5, when this process typically resolves around age 3 for most children. On the other hand, many children with phonological disorders also apply phonological processes that are rarely observed in the speech of children with typically developing phonologies. Therefore, these processes are referred to as idiosyncratic phonological processes because they are somewhat unique to children with phonological disorders. The 5 processes discussed in this lecture are not the only idiosyncratic processes you might observe in real children's speech, but they are among the more frequently observed idiosyncratic phonological processes. As stated in the previous slide, the idiosyncratic phonological processes are ones that are not typically observed in the speech of typically developing children. In addition, these processes normally do not appear to make the production simpler or to better fit the CV-CV syllable pattern, like the syllable structure, substitution, and assimilation processes that we covered in the first portions of this module, that we covered in the earlier portions of this module. Therefore, the patterns observed are unexpected, given the normal patterns of development for consonant place and manner of articulation. The 5 idiosyncratic processes we will review are glottal replacement, backing, initial consonant deletion, glide becomes stop, glide to stop, and stop to fricative. Glottal replacement is one of the more difficult idiosyncratic processes to learn to recognize, but it is important to learn to distinguish it from consonant deletion. In glottal replacement, a target consonant is changed to a glottal stop. For example, a child who applied the phonological process of glottal replacement to the L in the word lip would pronounce lip as ip. If you don't listen carefully, it will sound like the consonant has just been deleted, but you need to listen for the abrupt onset of the vowel in the initial position or the abrupt ending of the vowel in final position. You might be better able to distinguish whether glottal replacement or consonant deletion. You might be better able to determine whether glottal replacement or consonant deletion had occurred in initial position if another vowel precedes the word. For example, if the child were trying to say a lip, it would be easier to hear if there were any stoppage of airflow between the and the I sound in a ip versus a ip. It's important to determine whether or not glottal replacement or consonant deletion has applied in a child's speech, because it may affect the clinician's hypotheses about the child's underlying phonology. That is, do they represent the word as having any consonant in the beginning or not? These different hypotheses regarding the underlying representation might change the treatment plan for a child, making transcription accuracy a key. Making transcription accuracy crucial. Making transcription accuracy crucial. The phonological process of backing refers to the change in place of articulation of a consonant that is produced with a more front place of articulation, like a bilabial or an alveolar consonant, to one with a more back place of articulation, like a palatal or a velar place of articulation. For example, a child who applied the phonological process of backing to the sh in the target word push might pronounce push as puk. Recall that the consonants with a more front place of articulation, the bilabial and alveolar consonants, for example, are typically acquired earlier than consonants with a more back place of articulation, the palatal and velar consonants, for example. Therefore, the phonological process of backing goes opposite to the normal order of acquisition, goes opposite to the normal pattern of substitution processes that we would expect, based on the order of acquisition of the phonemes. The phonological process of initial consonant deletion refers to the deletion or elision of one or more word initial consonants from the onset of a syllable. Of a word initial consonant from the onset of a syllable. Again, it might be difficult to distinguish this process from glottal replacement, but it's important to try to determine which of the two processes applies. Which of the two processes applies? For example, a child who applied the phonological process of backing to the k in the target word cat A child who applied the phonological process of initial consonant deletion to the k in the target word cat might pronounce cat as at. Might pronounce cat as at. So a cat would be pronounced a at if the consonant were deleted, but a at if glottal replacement applied instead. Remember that the syllable structure processes that I reviewed earlier, like weak syllable deletion and final consonant deletion, change the syllable structure to better fit the CV-CV syllable pattern. Initial consonant deletion, on the other hand, changes the syllable structure so that the word is not a better fit to the CV-CV pattern. When cat is changed to at, for example, it changes from the CV pattern to VC, if anything, a worse fit to the CV-CV pattern. The last two idiosyncratic processes that I will review are stop replacing a glide and fricative replacing a stop. Their names are fairly self-explanatory. In stop replacing a glide, a stop consonant is substituted for a target glide consonant. For example, a child who applied the phonological process of stop replacing a glide might produce the target word yes as des. In the idiosyncratic phonological process of stop replacing a glide, a stop consonant in the idiosyncratic phonological process of fricative replacing a stop, a fricative consonant is substituted for a target stop consonant. For example, a child who applied the phonological process of fricative replacing stop to the p in the target word papa might pronounce papa as fa-fa. Recall that stop consonants are typically acquired earlier than fricative consonants in normal phonological development. Therefore, like the process of backing, the phonological process of fricative replacing a stop goes opposite to what we would expect given the normal order of acquisition of phonemes. We have now covered all of the developmental phonological processes that you will be asked to identify on the module completion quiz and on the midterm and final. You should be able to complete and on the final. You should be able to complete exercise 8.14 in your textbook and should practice transcribing the speech of children in the end of chapter review exercises in broad transcription. Check your answers in the back of the book and review the recording and the reading if you find that you're making several mistakes. This is the end of Part 5. This is the end of Module 6. This is the end of the recordings for Module 6. This is the end of Part 5. This is the end of Part 5 and the end of the recordings for Module 6.